So is there anybody that went through any of these field exercises? Wow. Wow. Excellent. So instead of doing some group work, I just want to ask if a few of you can give some feedback. Okay, to be in resources, you don't have to be the owner of the enterprise. You don't have to be the owner. There are many people in resources who are not the owner. Okay, that was, thank you. That was very good feedback. You don't have to be the owner. It would be Jose.
Yeah, Jose and Farah, they both have similar work. One is government, one is resources.
Okay.
I think Farah should also be government.
Let me see. Okay. So here you have, he's planning events. Yeah.
And
Okay.
Farah is here. She is also farm warehouse manager. So she plans the activities of the warehouse.
Okay, but what is the difference? What's the difference between Jose and Farah? You notice we tried to pick names from different cultures? Yeah. Can anyone explain why Jose is in government and why Farah is in resources? Okay, think about what is the position of each of the fields. So government is taking care of people. Now, in government, they also move resources around, but they're trying to take care of people. They're trying to take care of people's needs. Again, like a parent, not like a servant. They're arranging for people to get what they need and coordinating that. Making sure people get what they need according to law. Make sure the law is fair. Or making sure people are protected by the law. In resources, what are they doing? They're making resources available. Now, often in resources, you're pulling from natural resources. You're pulling from the land, the sea, the sky, the animals, and you're creating the raw materials for human wealth. Food. Government, you're not creating the raw, we're not creating the raw materials. Nobody's creating them, obviously. But for ease of communication, government is not creating it. They're just redistributing. Resources are the only people who, in a sense, are creating it. Artistry is manipulating it. Government is redistributing it. Ideas is giving the vision for everything, which is why one of the criticisms is that it's a useless field. You follow? But resources is generating it. So Farah she's directly involved with managing the generation of resources. Can you understand the difference? Or is it still unclear? Well, of course. And government is managing the resources also. But it's a very different emphasis. The emphasis is completely different. Everyone is dealing with people in some extent, and everyone is dealing with resources to some extent. But how? In what way? What is the emphasis? Is this getting clearer at all? If somebody is taking things from the land and the animals and the sky and the water, and they're getting raw materials, they're getting the raw materials from nature, and they're giving them to the public at a profit to themselves, they are in resources. And they are making a profit because they want this to be sustainable and regenerative. They're going to the natural resources and they're extracting them. The people in artistry are then working with them. Government is overseeing that people are getting, streets, hospitals, schools, following the law, that they're getting the stuff, they're having the facility to use these resources, but they're not extracting them. Government may sometimes help in redistributing resources according to need. You don't see that he's looking at the greater good of society.
I don't see him primarily focused on the greater good of the society.
You think he's more interested in profit? Now, see, both are interested in the greater good of society. Actually, everybody's interested in the greater good of society. Anyone who's following their Dharma is interested in the greater good of society. If they're not following Dharma. So a resource person who's making a profit is not making a profit because they don't care about the greater good of society, they only care about themselves. They're making a profit because they know that without making a profit, they can't do something sustainably and regeneratively, and therefore they can't serve the society. Whereas government is working on a constant supply of tax revenue that they're constantly giving out. And they can, at least theoretically, exhaust their revenues. But he's doing government-type work in providing, it's the kind of thing that government does. Oh, all the time. Like, I grew up in New York City, and the government was always putting on concerts and art shows and... What? Yeah. The government's constantly organizing various events and providing venues for those events. So people may be doing government-type work as if it were a business, or they may be doing government-type work as if it was a charity. I mean, technically speaking, government people should never be getting money from charity, according to Shastra. But in the modern day, a lot of nonprofits and NGOs are getting their money from charity rather than tax revenue. And like a landlord is another example that Srila Prabhupada gives of someone in the government field. So you might say, well, you're running the apartment complex as a business. But the type of thing you're doing is you're providing a government type service. You're not taking wealth from natural resources and making them available as raw materials. And so the Dharma is different. Government, again, you're looking at terminology. It's a funny, we're doing the best that we can. So the mentality of people in that field, whatever you want to call it, is providing facility for people. Now, traditionally, thousands of years ago, I don't know if it was only done by people who collected tax. I don't know. I mean, landlords existed even thousands of years ago. So a landlord, again, it appears to be a business, but it's not. It's just the way you're getting the money to do it is through business rather than through taxes. But what you're doing is government-type work. That's what government does. It provides parks and recreation buildings and venues for people to have various events. That's one of the functions of a government. Yeah, but beyond that, government also provides facilities for people that they have difficulty providing for themselves. They cannot be provided easily by individual people. So some of that today may be done as if it were a business, and some of it may be done as if it were a nonprofit. which maybe in the traditional Shastric sense didn't happen. Although I have a question about landlords, even traditionally in the Shastric sense. I would imagine that even in times thousands of years ago, there were people acting as landlords, which appeared to be a business. And Prabhupada very clearly says that that's in this field. So it's a similar kind of thing. If you're running any kind of a community and you're providing resources for that community from some sort of fees that people are paying you. Vicarious. Okay, we're looking at it primarily through the lens of what is the Dharma. Jose's Dharma is quite different from that of resources. He is not trying to create wealth for society. He's not pulling from natural resources. So you would put him in artistry. Then you would put him in artistry. Oh, I mean, okay, but I don't agree with you. I mean, I just see that the government is what provides venues for things that are beyond what an individual can do. And I see it also that what he's doing is much more in the role of a parent than a servant. So like the project manager I told you that I met, who goes into someone's, what do you want? And they just arrange it for what they want. I mean, he's managing things, but he's just setting up everything. Whereas someone else who's much more like, usually event planners don't just give you what you want, but they give you a lot of direction. They're much more in giving you guidance that they know how to serve you. Yeah, much more like that. I mean, it's most likely that the big hotel industry is also like that, because they're like temporary landlords. You're just going through for a day or two, right? But they also have big event halls and big event planning and that kind of thing. They're providing on a small scale, in a small way, a lot of the things that government provides. I mean, there's not very many people in government who do everything that government does. A firefighter just protects you from fire. They're not protecting you from a foreign enemy. They're not building the roads. You know, well, what to speak of like a private security guard in a business? They're doing government type work also. They're also in the field of government. But they're not, how many people are providing everything? Then you're looking at like the prime minister or the president or the king or the mayor. But those are not, it's not just at the top. Like we were saying in business, it's not just the person at the top who's in resources, but on many, many levels you're going to have people in resources. So Jose is on a low level. He's providing some of the type of things that government provides, but he's providing it in the form of a business type. It looks like a business type enterprise, but it's not. He's not collecting, again, resources. The reason you want to look at this is that the Dharma is very different. The mentality and the values is very different.
Earlier times, landlords used to also function as mini rulers in their respective estates.
They still do.
Yeah, estates. In their respective estates.
They still do.
Used to have order within the
They still do.
community of peasants working on.
They still do.
So that's why in that sense,
They still do.
considered as ruler perhaps, but
They still do. If you have a landlord, he might be hiring a security guard. They still do.
that flavor is not there in Jose's work.
I respectfully disagree. It's a temporary rulership, but it is a rulership. Yeah, and a whole venue. And most likely he provides security as well. Yes.
Even the government does this. Even the government does the same. So, do you, if yes, then do you equate government is equal to stakeholder management?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by stakeholder management.
Because different stakeholders are involved in his work, like caterers, event planning, and different, like venue managers, suppliers. He got
Okay.
clients. So there are different stakeholders to get his objective done, an event to be conducted. He got different people to coordinate and get the work done. So even government does the same thing. So if it's yes, then do you equate government is equal to stakeholder management?
I doubt it. I don't know. I really don't know. I'd have to look more at what you mean by stakeholder management. I know you just explained it to me, but I'm hesitant to make a statement without having more information.
Oh.
Yeah.
Evaluations of that, we have to understand the definition. So like you said, artistry, there's the three things. It's beauty, it's functionality, and the third thing I
Support.
don't support. So we have to understand those definitions. Then the
Can
like
someone
said,
flip that over?
the fields itself, they're just titles. Like you've said, you all worked hard to find an appropriate title. And I think we need to just make a mind shift here, because when we say government, for example, we're thinking what our current government is like, and that's how we're defining, as opposed to looking for the definitions that are as per the text you've given us. And so that's the mind shift we've got to make now. And then the third thing is that we need to also, the next mind shift we've got to make is that we have to look at it from a Dharma point of view, as
Correct.
opposed to a current way that we live
Correct. 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 The primary lens we want to look through is that of values and Dharma. What is the Dharma? What is the mentality? Is the mentality primarily I want to be a wealth generator for which I need to make profit to be sustainable, or is the primary Dharma I want to give people facility and care and protection? Which of those two? And government and resources has a lot in common. I mean, you look at any two fields, they have a lot in common. All right, I don't have more time to go through this. I want to look at, I hope as we do this next lesson, it will clarify even more, and then tomorrow morning should clarify even more. Okay, we're going to look at part of Principle 2, which is advancing through life while nourishing our nature. And again, this is about the four fields. And we're going to be also looking at this verse, that we cannot repress our nature. We cannot repress our nature. I mean, people sometimes ask the question, can you change your nature in this life? And the answer is no. Now, there is one purport where Prabhupada says that if you're fully Krishna conscious, you can do anything. And he gives two examples, Parasaram and Vishvamrita. So, first of all, at least I'm not fully Krishna conscious, so that doesn't apply to me. Second of all, Parasaram is God, and Vishvamrita changed his nature, but it took him 60,000 years and a lot of trouble. So my answer is yes, it's true, but it's not relevant. It's a true statement, you can change your nature, but it's not relevant to anybody that I know. You'd have to be God or Vishvamrita or fully Krishna conscious, and it's just not that meaningful. So this statement that we can't repress our nature is much more meaningful to us. That to understand what our nature is seeing what cannot be repressed. I just want to show you again, this is the full Gaudiya Math logo as designed by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. We modernized it a little bit. Our picture of the printing press is a little modernized. And this is put on our temple gate in Mayapur. Now this is how Rukmini and I understand the prosperity types that the fields generate for others, not necessarily for those in the field themselves. Now, there is, it's in the book also, there is a relationship between what prosperity types are generated for others and what workers in the field are likely to find for themselves, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence at all. So one thing that a good friend of mine pointed out when reading through our manuscript was that, wow, the Shastra almost always describes the expertise of the fields. It's describing who has dharmic expertise. And I'm going to emphasize again, any job has information, skills, or the craft, and the values, or the dharma. And the Shastra describes the values or the dharma and sometimes part of the craft. But when we look at ourselves, we want to look for this. Do I have the inclination? Because until you've been trained how to use your values properly, they don't necessarily show up the way they look like in the Shastric descriptions. And this one friend felt that this point was one of the most important that we made in our book. When you're trying to figure out what field am I in, you're not looking for this, you're looking for this. The same could be true for the craft and the information. You know, often people will say, do what you're good at, do what you love. But how do you know what you're good at if you've had no training in it? You may not have had an opportunity to find out that you're good at it. Does that make sense? Yeah? And the same is true for the Dharma. I also want to emphasize that you can be very good at the information and craft of something that is not your values. Okay, so you notice we're going to look at some of these questions. The technical skills of the thing. Yes. Between the... This guy's expert. He's expert. You know who this guy is? Usain Bolt is his name. Good name, huh? Mr. Bolt. He's an Olympic gold medal winner in running. 3 times? 3 times in a row. Wow. And he looks like he's having fun, too. The other guys don't look like they're having fun. He's expert. She's not expert. She's a beginner. Is she an Olympic runner? I don't know yet. She's just learning how to walk. You see, we have a little picture up there also of a baby learning how to walk. So we're going to put that in any slides that talk about beginning. In each of the fields, what we're going to look at is what shows a beginning inclination for the field that may yet be untrained. Yes? Well, every particular job has a craft.
Values for, say, suppose each of these
These
fields.
are the values of each of the fields.
Like for artistry, beautifying and
Supporting.
supporting. That is the value.
That's the core value.
Okay.
And service, you can also say. I mean, everybody's serving. What I'm teaching in these seminars is the values. I'm not teaching the craft.
Right.
Normally, when you go to school at the present time and you go to train for a job, you'll be taught the information and the craft. Maybe you're taught a little of the values. Maybe you'll get a business ethics class or something. But you're not really taught the values and the dharma of the field.
Okay, so just to clarify, so a person in the government field, his value system would say, did I do this thing in a justifiable way?
No,
Is it
just as in justice,
Okay.
not justifiable.
Yeah.
Ah! Ah! Very different word, very different meaning. Justice. Did I help promote justice and honor?
Okay.
Did I help promote care, morals, ethics, fairness?
Makes sense.
So in ideas, did I promote truth, wisdom, understanding, introspection, vision, guidance? In government, did I help promote justice, honor, care, law, protection, morals, ethics? In resources, am I making society wealthier? Am I directly giving people prosperity? And am I doing that in a sustainable, regenerative way? And in artistry, am I making things work? Am I supporting people? Am I making things beautiful? Am I making people happy? Am I fulfilling their desires?
or businessman or entrepreneur. So, and they're doing pretty good in their job as well.
Okay.
So, what sort of this?
I don't understand what you're asking.
I'm saying previously I know
Like
many
what
people.
job did they have previously?
They were in sales, marketing,
Well, that's also resources.
but after that they become a businessman.
That's also resources.
Okay, so it's a kind of job you're saying.
They just move from one job to another in the same field.
It's not job. I'm saying the business. They become now. There are a lot of teams they are managing.
They move from one career to another, but in the same field. Those are both. That's both work in the field of resources. They didn't change from one field to another. You can change jobs as much as you want within the field. Just don't go to another field that's not yours.
Earlier, he's working for someone, but now
That's okay, but it was still in resources. It's not that everyone in resources works for himself. Then you only have the people at the top who are in resources, like he was thinking.
Okay.
Okay, so like I just give the example of our youngest son, Keshava. So when he was 7 years old, he started a business selling office supplies to our Gurukul students. So my husband would place the order. It wasn't online then. You had to fill out a catalog and send it in the mail. So he would place the order, and then our son would sell the pencils and the notebooks and like that, and he would give back to his father the basic wholesale price, and he would keep the profits. When he was 9, we moved to another temple, and we would show videos of the Ramayana and Mahabharata after the Sunday feast. We had a big screen like this as part of the school, and in those days people didn't have big screen TVs. So people would come to the Gurukula, which was in our home, and they would watch the videos, and he would make fresh orange juice. He'd squeeze the oranges, and he would freeze it, and he would sell orange juice popsicles for a profit. Later, he started making pizza and cheesecake and things like that. So when he was the first few jobs he got were just very low-level type of things. I think he was installing cable or something, and he had those for maybe a month or two. And then he ended up working in a textile company, And he became one of the leaders. By the time he was 21, he was one of the leaders in that company. He worked directly under the head boss. He became their network administrator. He managed like 100 computers and was guiding people and was very much involved in the running of the business. At the same time, he was getting his bachelor's in business administration. And as soon as he got that, one devotee offered him a job as the CEO of a prasadam business, so he moved and he got that job. That's where he met his wife, got married. So he was the CEO of the prasadam business for many years. They were making like health bars. You've seen those things? So, I mean, he was running then. I mean, he had done a lot with the textile business in this regard, but this even increased. You know, where do you source where do you get the almonds from, and where do you get the honey, and where do you get the dates, and where's the best places to get that, and what's going on in the market, and what are the competitors doing, and how do you advertise, and how do you get it in the right shops, and how do you get the right position on the shelves in the shops. And my father was a CEO of a food business, so I was actually quite familiar with this kind of thing. And so was my husband's father. And then, you know, how to get it out to the public and so forth. So he was looking at he was overseeing everything in the business. And then, unfortunately, the owner sold the business to non-devotees. And at that time, my son said to me, well, I was a part owner. I've now gotten enough money so that if I bought a house in a place with a low cost of living, I could retire at 30. And I was like, great. He said, no, I've purposely bought an expensive house and an expensive car so I would keep working. I was like, okay. And then for a while he became a finance manager in a company, which was a relief after the whole drama of selling that business. But anyway, he didn't like that work very much at all. Basically, he would finish all of his work by noon, and then he would find ways how to make the company more profitable, and they would say, be quiet, you're the finance manager, we don't want to hear from you. And I said, can you read a book? He said, no, I'm not allowed to read a book. I said, but you finished all your work. And anyway. So after a while, he quit that job, and he started working for a consulting business that was installing and customizing SAP software, which enables you to run all aspects of a business. So he was working at that job, and he told me that he could do the installation or the customization in 1/4 the time of any of their other workers. And the bosses told him, you can't, and they're billing by the hour, and the bosses told him, you can't bill honestly. Because if you bill honestly, nobody will pay anybody else for the same work that you're doing. And so Keshava was very upset. He's a highly ethical person, and he's like, you know, I can't do this. I can't inflate my hours just so it makes the company look good. And he was also really disturbed by the fact that he was only getting like 1/4 of the money that was being paid for his services. The rest was going to the company. So finally he started his own consulting business, and now he says he doesn't like to install the software because he says the sales reps always inflate what it can do, and then they're angry with him when it can't do everything that they claimed it could do. So he works with customization and support and general consultation. So all of those jobs were in the field of resources, every single, except the first 2 or 3 jobs he got, which were in artistry, and he hated them, and he stayed in them for like 2 months each. So all of those things were in resources. It's not that only once he got to be a total entrepreneur in charge of his own business. I mean, even now he has like some partners that he works with. When he was the CEO of someone else's company, which he had part ownership in, he was in resources. When he was the finance manager, he was in resources. When he was managing the textile company, he was in resources. And his whole value system is in resources. So just to look at the inclination, like the kind of things he has said to me. He said, Mata, I know I've made a significant contribution to society because by the time I was 20 years old, I had generated more wealth for society than you and Father put into raising me. And I was like, oh. That's not how I process the world. So he and his wife have 3 children, and he's also said to me, the way you know you've raised good children is by the time they're 20, 25, they will have generated more wealth for society than you spent on raising them. So his whole mood is in generating wealth and prosperity for society. He also wants to make money. I mean, another thing that happened once he started his own consulting business, he said, Mata, now I'm making more money working 3 days a week than I was working for someone else 5 days a week. I'm like, great, just work 3 days a week. And he said, no. He said, why would I do that? He said, I'll work 5 days a week and make even more money. So he really, I mean, to me, he just really epitomizes this mentality of the field of resources. And that was there even when he was 7. It was quite obvious that that was his mentality. So when you see that little picture of the baby walking, this is we're talking about initial mentality. Now, a lot of children like to sell things because when we're children, we have no power, and we're thinking, if I have money, I'll have power. And so we might like to get a little money to get some power. But you'll see people in resources they're really, this is an overwhelming thing for them. Many people also in this field are very interested in numbers. That's a common, not for everybody, but it's very common to have this sort of expertise. That may also be indicative of a field of ideas. It depends how the interest in numbers manifests. And this interest in increasing, wanting to be, as we said, the Bhagavatam says that people in this field are always thirsty. Is that obvious in what I just told you about Keshava? He's always thirsty. You want people in this field to be always thirsty, and you will really see that tomorrow morning. What happens when people who don't have that kind of thirst try to work in this field? It's a catastrophe. Their mood is, I want to make society prosperous. I want to make society prosperous. I want to make society prosperous. See, in government, their mood is, I want to make society fair. That may be subtly different, but it's different. In resources, is I want to make society prosperous. And this may show up initially as being very interested in resources, maybe in land, maybe in animals, maybe in money, maybe in numbers. Again, numbers can also be an interest in ideas. They often, not always, but often tend to be risk takers and rarely satisfied with their success. They tend to be very goal-oriented rather than process-oriented. Also, they tend to be unsentimental, which may look to other people as unempathic. Very practical-minded people. By the way, the research shows that our values are obvious by the time we're 13. In my own experience working with hundreds of children, I would say that very often it shows up before that. At least some indicators show up before that, but certainly by 13 our values are obvious. Okay, now we're going to look at the expertise of people in this field. They're systems thinkers. But their system thinking is confined to their own particular work. Now that could shift as they go from one job to another. It's like when Kesha was in the textile business, he was very aware of the whole system of cloth manufacture and cloth distribution, and it was very specialized. They work with what's called mattress tape and ticking. The tape is what goes around the edge of the mattress, by the way, which is something I learned when he worked there. So they really know the system of their particular resource. If they're working in agriculture, they'll know the production schedules of the animals, when they're likely to breed, when they're likely to produce wool or milk, or they're going to learn about the different harvest and the different crops and the different kinds of soil and so forth. And so they're understanding flows of the natural world or of money. And they want to understand these flows to redirect them to themselves and increase them. Now, their mood, and this is going to be very important tomorrow morning, is that they put their own oxygen mask on first. If they're not making a profit, then what they're doing is not sustainable. So we're not talking about being sustainable and regenerative just in an ecological sense, but we're talking about, will the business enterprise continue? Not just will it be successful for a season. Srila Prabhupada talks about this quite a lot, about the people who are expert in this field, that they can make money when the market's going up and when the market's going down. They can shift to different products or different lines depending on what's going on. As I was saying, even these people pushing these carts in Govardhan town, that's exactly what they do. They know, okay, in the hot season we don't get very many pilgrims. In Kartik we get a lot of pilgrims. What do the pilgrims buy versus what do the residents buy? When do we ever get any tourists? They know something of what's happening politically in different parts of India or different places with a resource thing, even though they're just running a little handcart on the street. They're preparing for downturns in the market. You follow? Hmm? They underconsume the harvest. As I mentioned before, they're saving seeds. They're never going to distribute everything, which makes people think they're greedy. They're not going to distribute everything. They're going to save, to reinvest, to replant. Yes? Now, this is important. In each of the fields, there's something people will sacrifice for. So in this field, people will sacrifice for preserving the flow of resources in the society and for maintaining high ethical standards in their livelihood. That's part of being sustainable and being regenerative. And again, these are the main questions that they ask about their work. Any questions about the nature of the people in resources? By the way, as you all know, God appears to be in this field. Of course, he's transcendental, but he likes to play in this field. No. Krishna. Yeah, he does that too. Usually people will not be judgmental. They will know the qualities of other people and engage them. That would be a lovely world. I'm not sure if that's a description of reality or a vision for the future. But
in resources will consider, apart from these two questions, they also consider what their value system also says, whether I'm making the society prosperous.
yes. Well, am I creating sustainable and regenerative prosperity for the society?
Okay, but it looks more like from government perspective that the resources people ideally should not care much about others' prosperity.
You're probably not in this field. I have someone in the back.
Their greed, but they will cover it up by saying that even if they do unethical things, they will say that this is for the welfare of the society.
Okay. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point that all these four fields always exist, And people with these four natures always exist. Correct? Am I correct? All right. So why do we have to teach Varnashram then? The fields already exist and the people already exist. Why do we have to teach this? Because people are not following their Dharma. So let's say you have the beginning inclination, okay? You're always thirsty. You want to create profit. You want to create wealth. You show that inclination when you're 13, 14 years old. And no one ever trains you in the Dharma. Could you become corrupt?
Yes.
Is that true for all four fields? Yeah. So we have several problems. One, which we'll look at tomorrow morning, is people doing work that's the wrong work. They're in the wrong field, which hurts themselves and hurts others. The other big problem is you're in the right field, but you're not doing it dharmically. You have to be trained in even though it's your own dharma, you still have to be trained in it. Just like, I always had a natural ability to teach, but I had to be trained in the information. I had to be trained in the craft of teaching, and I had to be trained in the dharma of teaching. Just because I had an inclination doesn't mean that I was going to do it right. So the world is full of people who are either in the wrong place or they're in the right place doing it wrongly. What we're talking about here is the dharmic expertise. So first we talked about the inclination. How can you look at someone who hasn't been trained in the dharmic expertise, or maybe even the craft expertise or the information expertise, and say, this is the person who belongs in the field of resources and should learn the dharmic expertise? That's different from looking at a bunch of bozos who are, don't know what they're doing and are messing everything up, excuse me. Dharma is how to use your nature in a way that's in harmony with the Lord. Yes. Dharma is how to use your nature in a way that's in harmony with the Lord. The essential, authentic, we could say the best version of yourself. How to be the best version of yourself. Your Dharma is your innate nature, your innate tendency, but you may not know how to express it properly. Therefore, that has to be trained. Yes, swa means your own, yes. Okay, I want to go on to the other fields. Do you have a specific question about resources?
Yeah, I just, I'm thinking from real case studies, what we've experienced.
Okay.
Like a father invests for the son's education. Now the son is ethical. He wants to do it as a welfare. But the
He
father
wants to
says that
do-
I have invested so much in you.
He wants to do what as a welfare?
Suppose he becomes a doctor.
Okay.
Now the system is such that the education is so costly. So the father says, I have invested so much in your education.
Okay, so you're not asking a specific question about resources. You're asking about, as far as I can understand,
conflict of values.
why people go into the wrong field or why people do their things wrongly. So we have quite a bit of a section in the book about pressures given by family, by society, and by others to go into the wrong field or to act in your field wrongly and how you can try to deal with them. But that's a little bit beyond what I'm talking about right now. It's important, and we spend quite a bit of time on it. Okay? Any other questions specifically about inclinations for resources? Yes. Everybody, but yeah, okay. Correct. No. First, it's irrelevant. But that whole question is irrelevant. Let's think about the Bhagavad Gita. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna, be above the modes of nature, be on the platform of the soul, and still act according to your duty in this world. So he says that when one is above these psychophysical identifications, he says one no longer has to do anything in this world, nor does he have to not do anything in this world. He said such a person has no reason to do his duty and no reason to give it up. At that time, a person will still, if they're going to work in the world, they may not work in the world at all anymore. They may not have any career. They may become a commensal. They may become a sannyasi, literally or otherwise. But if you do continue to work in the world, you're probably going to work according to the same psychophysical nature, because that you still have the body. It's like if I have a car, or I have a bicycle, or I have a skateboard, or I have a boat, no matter how Krishna conscious I am, your boat doesn't turn into a skateboard. Your bicycle doesn't turn into a car. But it's mostly irrelevant, because I think for most of us, we're not going to say, well, I'm fully and completely Krishna conscious. Prabhupada says at that time, your duty becomes clear like the sun lighting up the sky. And in the Shastra, pretty much all I can't think of any example other than Prabhupada talked about Parasuram, which is kind of a funny situation, and Vishvamrita, where people change their nature. We have some examples where people give up anything to do with the world, but Arjuna wanted to do that, and Krishna finally says, okay. Go to a secluded place, sit on deerskin, stare at your nose, chant Om, don't see your family anymore, don't see Draupadi and Subhadra, and just pull the roots out of the ground and eat them. And Arjuna's like, yeah, Shanchali Mana Krishna. And what happens if I fail? I'll just be like a little riven cloud in the sky. And then Arjuna stops pushing this, because he had kept pushing this in chapters 3, 4, and 5. He's like, why am I going to fight? Why can't I just do Buddha yoga? Why can't I just leave everything? And Krishna keeps saying, no, you fight, but for me. Fight transcendentally, which we'll talk about more tomorrow afternoon. Krishna doesn't say to him, well, now that you're my devotee, now you can become a potter. You don't have to be a statesman anymore and a warrior. You can be a potter because now you're my devotee. He doesn't say that. He says, do the things which are your nature and become my devotee. So that's what's relevant for us. What happens is when people think, well, if I'm a devotee, then I can do anything, is they cause havoc. Also, people exploit that kind of thinking. Well, now you're a devotee, you can do anything. And they'll put you in a situation that you're good at the information and the craft, but it's at odds with your values, and you'll damage yourself and you'll damage others. So thinking because I'm a devotee I can do anything ends up it just causes havoc in society. And I just don't see that that's where the Shastra goes at all. Again, Krishna says when you're transcendental, you don't have to do anything and you don't have to not do anything either. So then why do you keep acting according to your nature? Well, Krishna says to set an example. He uses the example of Janak Maharaj, to set an example for those who are still have anupati, who are still identifying with their psychophysical nature, and in service, because that's the nature that you have. So you're no longer having to do that because you're identifying with it, but you're doing it because that's what you have, and so that's what you use to serve Krishna with. Does that make sense? Yes? I'm so glad you brought that up. I really want to limit this, though. Like, I'm going to take one more. Please limit it to the mentality of resources and not general questions, or we're not going to do what we need to do. Yes?
Mataji, can you elaborate on that point of making society prosperous? Like, what does it actually mean? For example, you were told about that seller who was selling stuff on the cart in Vrindavan. So, those might be some, basic essentials like a comb or a...
Yes.
So then, in that case, how is it helping to making the society prosperous? Because there are hundreds of sellers like that on the street.
Yeah. I'm confused. So just because there's hundreds of people selling combs, why wouldn't all of them be interested in giving prosperity to everybody? Well, if that's all they want to do, then they're adharmic. In the dharma of the field, that may be true in the inclination. Maybe they thought that way when they were 9 or 10 years old. And if they're trained in the dharma, then they will be then their natural inclination for profit making will be seen as the way to create sustainable and regenerative wealth. This is such an important but subtle point. I hope everyone is understanding this. So as a child or a young person, this tendency may show up as an interest in profit making, or interest in wealth and interest in resources. It may not initially show up as a desire to make the world prosperous. And so people may criticize it and say, oh, you're just profit-minded, you're just money-minded. But if it's recognized through, oh, this is valuable, this is something really valuable, and this is the way you bring sustainable wealth to the world. This inclination you have to be profit-minded, and the inclination you have to work with wealth and with raw materials and with natural resources is there in you because it has a function in society of bringing materials for prosperity to the world, which only a person with that mentality can do. People without that mentality cannot do it. And so this is a gift you've been given for the good of the world, and to help them to see that. So they're still going to be making a profit, but their reason for making a profit changes. And if they become a devotee of Krishna, they'll be wanting to do stuff not just for the good of the world, but for the glory of God. That Krishna himself says, if you do this yajna, you will live happily and attain liberation. Prabhupada said 195 times, peace and prosperity, which is the fields of, which two fields? Peace and prosperity. Prosperity is resources. Peace is government. Oh, I don't know. Capitalism is one particular way of looking at things that I'm sure has some benefits, but I'm sure some downsides as well. Yeah, I mean, capitalism has its downsides. I wouldn't say capitalism is entirely dharmic. I think that's really stretching it. All right, I want to go into, is this getting clear? Are we getting clearer? It may not be 100% clear, but are we getting clear? Are we getting more and more clarity here? All right, and you're starting to see how you could recognize a beginning inclination that may not yet be dharmic, and how you can train in that dharma. Yeah. Okay, let's go to artistry. So when we have this little thing at the top, that means we're looking at inclination. So loving to play with beauty and function, making things. Now, all children like to draw pictures, for example. But we're looking at people really liking to make some sort of craft thing or some sort of service to use tools, to use their body as a tool. This, and again, all of us have this to some degree, but this real emphasis on I made that, I fixed that, I cleaned that, as a real source of satisfaction in life. Did I tell, it's hard for me to remember what I said to whom. Did I tell you guys about my time in St. Petersburg? Okay, so when I was traveling in St. Petersburg, I stayed at the home of some devotees. They were actually out of town. I stayed in their home when they weren't there. And they had about 15 original oil paintings of this artist, Yugala Priya, Russian artist. And I had seen many of her pictures in electronic form. I use a lot of her paintings in many of my presentations. And my daughter loves her paintings. My daughter has prints of her paintings. So I had seen many prints and many electronics, but wow, seeing the originals was amazing. This artist uses a lot of texture in her work. So, you know, the pearls on Krishna's neck were little bits of paint, like sticking up out of the canvas, and she mixes sparkles with the paint. And this was not something you could get from a photograph or a print. It just wasn't translatable. They had at least 15 original paintings. And I was thinking about how much time and effort and care it would take to make one of these paintings, and then it's in someone else's house. Like, I wouldn't do that. I just wouldn't do it. If I were to make something like that, it would hang in my house. Or maybe a family or a friend or something, but I wouldn't sell it. And it just struck me, the mentality of the field of artistry is your happiness is that other people are enjoying what you're creating. It's kind of the core value of this field. You're happy to see other people wearing clothes you've designed. You're happy to see the clean streets where you've picked up the trash. So again, the basic value of this field is the closest to bhakti. This concept that I'm happy with Krishna's happiness. We were just reading in the Bhagavatam where Prabhupada said that this tendency can be seen in human society in this kind of giving. All right, let's look at the dharmic expertise of this field. So the Shastra says that one of the main aspects of the dharmic expertise of this field is honesty. Now, this is true for both the field of artistry and the field of ideas, but it's a different kind of honesty in these two different fields. So, for example, if you hire a plumber or electrician, is their honesty very, very important to you? And what do you want them to be honest about? You know, like I'm dealing with this really wonderful HVAC guy in America who's put in the heaters for Tulsi. So he installed one heater. We want to have a heater in there that's not electric dependent. So it just runs on propane, and that way if we have a power out in the middle of the winter, which where I am in North Carolina really means something, Tulsi won't just die, you know. So there aren't very many propane power, zero electric component heaters that are safe for plants. You know, he had to do a lot of research, and I expected it as something honest from him, which I wouldn't expect from someone in resources. In resources, you know, they're advertising their thing, and you know they're not going to give you a fully honest assessment. You don't expect advertising to be 100% honest, do you? Right? That would be really strange. But I expect my HVAC guy to be 100% honest. So he's going to say, okay, well, I found this model and this model. This will cost you a little more, but it has this features and this feature and this feature, and this one has this feature, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to be able to hook this one up, and this will be like this, and this will be like this. And I require total honesty. If you've ever dealt with these sort of people that are dishonest, it's a catastrophe. And another thing about the honesty of those who are dharmic in artistry is that they're satisfied with getting a fair price for their goods and services. They do not have the thirst of resources. They are not profit-minded. Obviously, they have to make enough money to live. They want a fair price. They want a fair salary. They want to be treated with dignity and respect, but they're not thirsty. I remember when he put in the second heater, because we found out the first one really wasn't suitable for the humidity of a greenhouse, so it failed. And I collected the money, and he said to me, so should I bill you or the temple? And I said, well, you should bill me because I collected the donations for it. I said, the whole congregation donated. He said, oh, then I'll donate too. Take $100 off the price. This is this man just really, to me, he really exemplifies the Dharma of this field. And he says, I'll come in and check that it's still working properly after a few days. I said, do I have to pay you extra for that? No. I want to make sure that my work is up to the standard. They're taking joy in the craft of their work, the dignity of their work, the beauty of their work. Again, they want to be given a fair price. They don't want to be cheated. They don't want to be disrespected. But what they're satisfied with is the dignity of their work. Also, this is a field of satisfaction, as is ideas. The people in artistry are satisfied if they have a decent, Prabhupada talks about this quite a bit, if they have a nice place to live, they have a loving partner, good food to eat, nice clothes to wear, and they're given fair compensation for their goods and services. They're not materially ambitious people. They're happy by seeing others happy. And they take great satisfaction in the work itself. In Bhagavatam 11:9-13, in another context, there's a talk about an arrow maker who was so absorbed in making his arrow that when the king's retinue came by with a lot of noise and color, and he didn't even notice. So this is part of the dharmic expertise, particularly of artistry, this really absorption in the details of the beauty of their craft. And this is true even if they're sweeping the floor in a shop. I'm going to tell you something interesting. So many times people in this field are not properly respected for their work. And I found one very interesting way of respecting them, which they really appreciate. So I was recently at our temple in Delhi, east of Kailash, Glory of India. So I was staying in the guest house, and at one point we're staying there for about 8 days. So at one point I said, can we get room cleaning? So this man comes in and he's just sweeping the middle of the floor. So I had a language barrier. I mean, my daughter's fluent in Hindi, and our youngest son is almost fluent in Hindi. But I'm not. I can't really converse. I can understand any word that's Sanskrit derived, but that's about it. So I get up, and I go to the chairs, and I move them. And I show you clean here. And I show him to clean under the bed, and to clean around here. And his first response was a little irritation, because obviously it's taking him more time. But I'm actually going through the room with him, and I'm smiling. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. what started to happen, and this is not the first or the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth time that I've done this kind of thing with people like this, is very soon he started to glow. Because what was I doing? I was caring. I was appreciating. I was communicating, hey, let's do this to a high standard of quality. And because that's actually the internal nature of people in this field, when I did that, there was like a harmonic resonance. It awakened something in him. I've seen this over and over again. And he just started to glow. This happened to me many, many years ago in Mayapur when I was teaching Bhagavad Gita chapters 13 through 18, which is a lot about the modes of nature, and I had broken my foot. And the room they gave me to teach in was, how shall we say, incompatible with teaching about the modes of material nature. If you can figure out what I'm trying to communicate without communicating. And so I said to the organizers, I said, I cannot teach about the three modes of nature in this room. I said I would clean it myself, but my foot is broken and I'm on crutches. I said I can't even do my own laundry. I can't do anything. All right, we'll send cleaners over. And it was the same kind of thing. You know, they're just like doing the bare bones, it wasn't even the bare bones minimum. Right? And of course they had to have a separate cleaner for the bathroom because God help us if anybody who cleans the floor of the classroom also cleans the bathroom. There's something that I've never been able to understand about Indian society, like why you have a separate bathroom. Just take a shower afterwards and change your clothes and wash your clothes. But anyway, so the guy comes in and just like throws a bucket of disinfectant on everything, and it was filthy and stinky and full of mosquitoes. And I went in there, the big teacher with the broken foot, with the white skin and the blue eyes, and I showed him how to clean the bathroom. And we did it again and again until it sparkled. And much to my surprise, this was actually my first experience with this, much to my surprise, the more I worked with him, the more he was glowing. After a while, he was just positively shining. He was just smiling, and just glowing. Somebody cares. Somebody notices. Somebody appreciates. Somebody actually wants a high standard of quality. Somebody is joyful with a high standard of quality. That's the mood of this field. They want to please somebody, and they want to please somebody with their craft. That is the dharmic expertise of this field. It's a very beautiful, natural humility. And if we help people and train people like this in their dharma, they glow. They're getting a kind of prosperity that's very meaningful to them. And it's very important that people in this field get a decent place to live, loving family and community, decent, nice clothes to wear, good food to eat, and a deep dignity and appreciation of the services and the skills that they're offering, without which society falls apart. And people who are expert in the Dharma of this field are really some of the most beautiful people in the world. And they give us some idea of what an ideal society is. Now, in every field, there's something one would sacrifice for, and this is also very important and something that is a great crime in modern society, that people with the dharmic expertise in artistry, they're willing to sacrifice by resisting pressure for artificially increasing profits or expediency that would harm the beauty of their craft, the integrity and the quality of their craft. So what's been happening in modern society is people in this field are pushed for profits or expediency that harm the integrity and quality of their craft. Hurry up and clean the room quickly. without real appreciation. But the natural tendency of these people is they're willing to sacrifice everything to maintain that integrity and that quality. All right? Any questions about the nature of people in artistry? I'd like to hear from someone who hasn't said something yet, if possible. Yes?
Acknowledgement or encouragement.
Absolutely.
So if there's, for example, a person by nature who does not get encouraged by, they don't need acknowledgement or...
Well, at least acknowledgement from the particular person they're serving. They may not be interested in yasha or community, but at least to get that from the person they're serving. Without that, they're lost.
From the person they're trying to please.
If I'm making a painting for you, I'm fixing your sandals, I'm cleaning your bathroom, and you don't care, I don't have a means of functioning. My wiring, my value system, my whole internal value system is to please. And if I don't know, have I pleased you or not? Then after a while I'll dry up. Does that make sense? I won't get, it's like if you keep people and resources from making a profit. Or if you keep them, like I was saying how my son, when he was a finance manager, and he was always thinking, that thirst, he was always thinking of ways to improve that whole business, and they wouldn't let him do it. No, you can't be thirsty. It was killing him inside. Similarly, if you hire someone to clean your bathroom, and you don't even notice when they come in and when they come out, you don't notice if the bathroom's clean or not. You never give them any acknowledgement, you never smile at them. They're going to die inside. What am I doing it for?
Hearing you speak all this, I'm remembering so many incidences and people who are in this kind of field doing the work. And I've also noticed the same thing where they would sometimes resist. They said, do it fast, do it quick. And they were like, why? I can take my time, I can do it better. They would offer that. Sometimes they will not even take money. They will say that, no, let me do it for you. And I've seen that if we kind of, sometimes just smile, be nice to them, it really encourages them so much. People are generally rude to people in this field. So
Thank you.
So much, very relative actually.
Wouldn't this be a wonderful world if we actually treated everybody in the world with great dignity and respect for the work that they do and help them to see how to do it as Dharma? Yes. Any other questions about the nature of people in artistry? Yes.
Is our karma is responsible for our dharma?
Okay. This is a big question. Why do we have the nature that we have?
And
I don't know.
why
I don't know.
No,
I
why?
don't know. No, I'm going to tell you right now. I don't know. And I think the only person that knows is him. So there's been a debate going on eternally about nature and nurture. What percentage is nature? What percentage is nurture? Where does the nature come from? I don't know. 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 I'll give you what we can say from Shastra is we take this particular birth due to our associating karna guna sangasya, sadasad janma yonishu. So we take this particular birth due to our association with the gunas, which is of course related to our karma, to our desires, the word is vasana, to the deep desires that we've had in different lives. Sometimes it may be due to other factors, it may be due to curses and blessings by higher beings may be involved. We may also, if we have had past lives in devotional life, we may also have particular nature because we have a particular mission. It may be a mixture of those. It probably is. It's probably a mixture of our association with the gunas, our vasanas or desires, and those of us who have some relationship with spirituality, something that the Lord would like us to do. Then Ayurveda talks about, I only studied Ayurveda for a year, but it talks about our nature being affected by the moment of conception, the situation during our mother's pregnancy with us, and the situation at our birth. There's also definitely some influence from our family as we're growing up. How do all these combine together? What's the percentage? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. I really don't, except for God, maybe Lord Brahma. And probably the answer is not exactly the same for each of us. So maybe someone in this room, their nature is 90% that they came here with a mission directed by God himself, and 10% dependent on their previous desires and activities, and maybe for some of us it's 10% mission and 90%. Doesn't matter. In the ultimate, whatever it is, wherever exactly it came from. So even people who don't believe in karma and reincarnation will tell you that by 13 you can tell what somebody's value system is in terms of career, and they will tell you that it's impossible to tease out nature and nurture. You know, when they think of nature, they're thinking of genetics. But I don't know of any, I cannot give you any authoritative pramana, nor can I give you any solid empirical research that can absolutely answer that question in a way that would be completely true for every individual. So I think rather than going that route, rather just say, what is it? Where did it come from? Who cares? Whatever, it's here. I find myself on a bicycle. I don't know how I got this bicycle. I don't know where it came from. I don't know whether I earned it through my karma or it was given to me as a gift by God or a little of both, or I don't know. But I got this bicycle. Now, and the question is, what do I do with it? That's more the question. So I really do not wish to talk about this further.
Question, because I have never seen the son of a rich person, he became a janitor or any sort of work lower, done by
Have
the
you ever
lower.
seen the son of a millionaire, though, work in the field of artistry? Oh, many, many times. So they might not be a janitor, but maybe they work as a landscape designer or a musician. They may still be doing something to make the world beautiful. If you want to look specifically at janitors, and again, I have 2 more fields to cover, so I want to make sure I do that by 5:30. There's a book I read by, what is it? Kelly something, Matthew Kelly, called The Dream Manager. And it's about a janitorial company. They cleaned offices at night. And they had, many workers who would go into the offices and clean the offices at night. So talk about not getting reciprocation. You're doing the cleaning at night. You never see the people you're working for at all. I mean, you see the people in your company that hires you, but you don't actually see who you're cleaning for. And it was a very high turnover job. People wouldn't stay in the job very long at all. And they weren't generally very happy. And then the company instituted a policy where they helped the employees to realize their personal dreams, whatever it may be. I want to get a secondary degree, or I want to visit Disney World, or I want to learn Italian, or whatever their personal dreams were, and they helped them to achieve that. And then they found that not only did they eliminate all their turnover, but they had people lining up to work for this company. They had more people wanting to work than they could hire. The quality of the work that people did increased many, many times, and the efficiency increased. They did higher quality work faster. They'd say, I can now clean 2 offices, and this time, is there a third I could clean? They were using less product to do their work. And they had to actually push people out if they said, hey, you really have a better career trajectory to go on from here. They said, no, I want to stay in this company. It was quite interesting. But yeah, usually people who want to work in artistry don't like doing so much low-level, unskilled work, but I think that's because they're not valued in that. But if somebody comes from a very wealthy background, and they don't, especially if they don't need to earn money, they may still work in artistry, but they're going to tend to work at a little bit more high status level in artistry. That is true. Yeah? Is it important that people what?
Is linked to some kind of craft only. The person is showing some kind of artist work through.
Well, it takes some craft to clean a bathroom properly.
But because
I mean, look, it does. Am I correct? Is there a certain, we call it unskilled work, but it's not entirely unskilled, is it? It just isn't. There's a certain skill level that you need. It's a very basic skill level. It's a very minimum skill level, but there is some, what we call unskilled labor. You're spreading asphalt on the road. You don't need to take a course in a school for it.
no, because there are people who train the other persons to become empowered through so that they can get some other skills to the other person. They train the other person to acquire some kind of skills so that the person become empowered. So do that kind of persons come in artistry?
If they're just training in skills, yes.
Yes.
If they're training in information skills and values, no, they're in ideas.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So if I'm training someone in the information skills and values of their work, I'm in ideas. Okay?
Yes.
All right, I need to go on. I need to go on. It is 5:02. It is 5:02. Yeah, it is. It is. And we have a book. Yeah, we have a book. What happened in Spain, I was teaching each of these classes 2.5 hours instead of 2. And then 1 hour after the class, 10 people were staying to discuss. I'm not doing that now. Okay, looking at ideas. So inclination for ideas. People who like to play with language or play with numbers in search of truth. People who are insatiably curious. Now, all children have high levels of curiosity, but some people are really insatiably curious, especially to know what is true and what is real. Often good at breaking ideas into smaller components, seeing the patterns in ideas in relationships and systems, often liking to teach others, although not necessarily, interested in research and study, sometimes interested in meditation, introspection, and worship. When I taught this in Gurukula, one of the things that I always bring out is, again, our nature cannot be repressed, and therefore it may show up in childhood that ways that may be annoying to others. Right? Like, for example, my son's wanting to sell things. Some people might have found that very annoying. We didn't, but some people might have. So when I taught this, one of my students said, "Oh, my parents are annoyed by my thinking." So I asked his mother, "Is that true?" And she kind of got embarrassed, and she said, "Yeah." She said, "Whenever he's just sitting around, I say, 'What are you doing?' 'I'm thinking.' And then I say, 'Why don't you do something practical?'" You understand the prejudice about the field of ideas? Yeah. So as you may know, I'm the chairperson of the Shastric Advisory Council to the GBC. So we had, at one point, a 10-day meeting in Italy to work on our hermeneutics project. And it had been expensive to get everybody's visas and tickets and all this stuff. And we had just 10 days there. So at one point, we kind of divided up a lot of the work. And we said, all right, everybody do this for the next 2 days and we'll reconvene. So we reconvened and we ran around the table and different people, I did this, and we came to one member. I was thinking. He ended up making one of the most valuable contributions to the project, but I remember feeling a little like, do you know how much money we paid to do this? And you're coming here and you're thinking. So this is some of the inclinations. And talking about things that are annoying as children. So what do you think I got in trouble for when I was 3 years old and I went to preschool? I'm asking, so I don't mind. Huh? Teaching. Who was I teaching? Huh? No. Who was I teaching? The teachers. Yeah. A lot of you here are mentors and counselors and guides, right? You see, this is what I do now. It's what I've ended up doing as my career. I not just spent 27 years teaching children, but I've spent a lot of time teaching teachers. So the teachers came to my home and they said, met with my parents and they said, your daughter's a real problem. She won't play with the other kids. She's coming up to us and saying, see that little girl over there? You should engage her this way, and you should take care of this kid that way. And so the whole time I was growing up, I was always hearing, stop teaching, especially from my mother. Would you stop teaching? Now, by the way, when I was, say, 12 or 13, if someone had asked me, what are you good at, would I have said teaching? Would I have said teaching? No. I thought it was a problem. I thought it was something I had to get rid of. Now, thankfully, what I was encouraged in, I was encouraged to be an avid reader, and that's an understatement. I used to read between 1 to 3 books a day. So I was encouraged in reading. I was encouraged in research. I was very much encouraged in public speaking and debate. Krishna arranged that. I had 3 years of training by one of the best public speaking and debate teachers in all of the United States. So in those areas, I was very much encouraged, but I never thought of using those things as a teacher because I thought being a teacher was evil. I thought, because I was criticized for it. Okay, so it may show up in one of those ways. Okay, the dharmic expertise of this field is mentioned quite extensively in Shastra: peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. Satisfaction, simple straightforwardness, devotion to God, and mercy. Now, the honesty of ideas is very different from the honesty of artistry. And you'll notice the Bhagavatam saying straightforwardness. Now, this is going to sound really sad because it is. So first of all, I should mention I didn't find out that I had the nature of a teacher until I was 24. And I met my god sister, Jyotirmayi, and the first thing she trained me in was the Dharma of teaching. Then she trained me in the craft. Now, I had been asked to teach children before because I had one, but I had no training, and so I didn't like it. I was just bored. We had no designated room, no paraphernalia, nobody trained me in anything. And within 2 weeks of learning the Dharma and the craft, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a teacher. So remember I talked to you yesterday about how much I struggled with wanting to be a leader. Okay, well, the other thing I really struggled with is this straightforwardness. I'm an extremely straightforward person, which has gotten me also into a lot of trouble. And what I've learned over the years is that a lot of times I just, because my capacity for diplomacy is extremely low. I can be diplomatic for maybe 2 minutes, and that's really pushing it. 30 seconds is much more doable, and after that, I just can't do it. It just simply doesn't work. But people don't always appreciate straightforwardness, to put it mildly. And so I've always thought this was a serious problem in myself. And it was only in doing this research for Career Dharma and reading again, and not that I hadn't read the Bhagavatam before, and somehow when I read straightforwardness, it was like, oh, that's my Dharma. This is a good thing. It's part of my value. But it's a very different honesty than artistry. It's not telling people what kind of pipes to get. It's telling people things that they may not find pleasing. It's kind of the opposite of artistry. Where artistry, you're trying to please your customer or your client. But in ideas, you're trying to please people in the ultimate sense, and you're trying to benefit people in the ultimate sense. But in the immediate sense, you're saying, you're just plain old wrong. This is why doctors ideally should be in ideas. The doctor shouldn't be telling you what's pleasing to you. They should be telling you what you need to hear. You have to lose weight. You have to give up smoking. Well, I don't want to give up smoking. Right? So it's a very different kind of honesty, and this will be very important as we look tomorrow. So people in this field may be dedicated to assisting others mentally and emotionally by helping them to understand life, by helping them to understand how things work. They may be dedicated to understanding themselves. So some people in this field, like you have, say, a full-time pujari who's doing that as their livelihood, they may not be teaching. They're guiding others in religious worship, but they may not be teaching. These people like to collect knowledge, understand it, use it, share it. Sometimes they can live in their heads without much awareness of the world around them. And they often want to find what is the essence of reality. Now, some people in this field are looking at big systems, and some are looking at very small parts of reality. So some people are researching, studying about, and teaching minutia, and some are looking at a big picture. These are systems thinkers. Now, our systems thinkers are in ideas, government, and resources, but in government and resources, they're thinking about systems for practical use. In government, they're looking at the systems of the human flow so that they can control it. And in resources, they're looking at the flow of resources so they control it. In ideas, they're not trying to control it, they're trying to understand it so they can guide others. Now, often people in the field of ideas are very detached. They're often very detached from the goings and comings of life. They're just often not very interested in them. An analogy would be, you know, like a sports commentator who's not playing the game, they're just commenting on it. So it's kind of like they're not really, a lot of people in ideas are not so much playing the game of life. They're just sort of observing it and commenting on it. This is a very, like artistry, this is a very satisfied field. This is not an ambitious field. So these people are happy to have their own garden, but they don't want a big enterprise. Their main determination is just kind of to remain equipoised and detached. Now, in artistry, people are satisfied with if they have what I would call creature comforts. If the externals of life are satisfying and they're treated with dignity and respect and they can hone their craft and perfect their craft, they're satisfied and they're not ambitious. In ideas, people are also satisfied and not ambitious, but what they're satisfied with is their internal, mental, intellectual stimulation in life. So in artistry, they're mostly satisfied with the externals, and in ideas, they're mostly satisfied with the internals, but these are both fields of satisfaction. Now, in ideas, people will sacrifice everything for the sake of objective truth. We were talking about journalists, right? There are journalists who've gone to jail because they wouldn't reveal their sources. Right? They're willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of objective truth. And the main questions they ask about their work are, is it true and is it wise? So any questions about the nature of the people in the field of ideas? Yes?
Yeah, now it is working. Yeah. You said they are not ambitious, but is it that their ambitions are of different nature? For example, do they want to find some ultimate truth that no one else has found? They want to.
Well, if it's ultimate truth, then I think others have probably found it.
No, yeah, I'm not saying ultimate, maybe intermediate truth, but they want to have an impact on the world of ideas. They
Everybody
want
wants to have an impact, but it's not.
They want to be remembered for. They want to leave
No,
legacy.
No, not so
typically,
much. No, not so much in this field. No. What? Yeah, but that's not the general tendency of this field. And Lord Chaitanya didn't like that he was like that. It's kind of, that's sort of a, it's a corruption. The general mood of this field is not like that. It's a very collaborative field. People work together very collaboratively. They just like when I got my PhD, the chair of my dissertation committee was Dr. Fenwick English. And after I received my degree, I said, thank you, Dr. English. And he looked at me and he said, no. Now we're peers. Now I'm Fenwick. So the mood of the field of ideas is like that. And this is something that is not understood in the other fields at all. It just isn't. There is a kind of equality. There's a kind of what Mintzberg, who's a big guru in organizational structure and culture, calls mutual adjustment. And people are not so interested in credit. I mean, they may have to in modern society publish or perish, in order to keep your tenure in a university. You may have to publish something with your name on it, but that actually goes against the grain of the general mood of this field. I mean, I had to strongly convince one devotee, you have to put your name on your books. And she said, why? I said, how do we know whether or not to trust it? She said, if we don't know who wrote this, we don't know who composed it, I don't know who you are, I don't know what line you're in. I said, in our Manashiksha book, for example, at the end, I put a little biography of each of the translators and each of the commentators and even of one of the artists. Because, 100 years from now, I mean, this may seem inconceivable, but 100 years from now, you might not know who is Sachinanda Maharaj. That's the way the world works. But that's the general tendency of this field, is to abjure credit. They may be interested in doing something that help, let me find something in medical research that is going to help people. But that's different from this kind of expansive ambition. And as soon as you put expansive ambition on people in either artistry or ideas, they don't like it. And often they'll withdraw from their work. They just don't like it at all. I mean, it can corrupt them. Like if you put expansiveness on people in artistry, sometimes resource people, they see an athlete or a musician or someone and they're, I could make a lot of money from this person. And they push them to be expansive. What does it do to the artistry person usually? Doesn't it usually corrupt them and really mess up their lives? And the same thing happens with people in the field of ideas. Generally, what will happen in the field of ideas if people are pushed to be expansive is they'll just withdraw. They'll just walk away if someone pushes them like that.
So you are saying in ideal state,
the dharma of it.
People from this field should not be after.
Are not. Their general nature
They are generally
is
not excessively credit seeking, excessively reward seeking. They are not, or
No.
even the subtle rewards like fame, etc. They are not so much carried by.
No.
Okay.
I mean, there may be people in this field for whom yasha is very significant in that they want to work with a group of fellow scientists and fellow researchers who really support one another. So there certainly are people in this field who have a desire for yasha like that. But they're not, like history book and statue in the park type of people. And it's just that, where is their satisfaction coming from? Where are they getting satisfaction from? Their internal and mental intellectual life. So people in artistry are getting satisfaction from the fact that they have a dignified life, a comfortable life, and they can create beauty and support in the world that's appreciated by the people that they're serving. That they're compensated fairly. People in resources, they're going to be satisfied that they're generating sustainable, regenerative wealth for the world and for themselves. People in government are going to be satisfied that I've helped protect people, and I've helped create, I've created justice in the world, I've solved injustice, I've advanced the cause of ethics and morality and care. I provided facility for people, like our event planner person. I provided facility for people so they have what they need. And people in ideas I'm satisfied that I've understood something and that I've been able to maybe that I've been able to communicate it to people and they've been able to understand, I've been able to share my knowledge. Some people in ideas only want to share their knowledge with other idea people. You've got these scientific journals that are only understood by people in the same field. And people spend their whole life writing for these journals that cost $150 subscription for 2 issues a year. And they're in the jargon of that discipline. So they're teaching, but they're just teaching their comrades. And, someone else in ideas, usually a journalist, will read these and say, oh, this should be translated into layman's language for the public, and put a particular article. So they may only be sharing within their own circle. What? Well, everybody needs some appreciation, ultimately from God. Ultimately, our desire for appreciation is there. We have that as a soul. Prabhupada says about Akura going to Vrindavan, that if one isn't recognized by Krishna, his whole life is condemned. So ultimately, part of career dharma is yajna and being recognized by God. To what extent we want to be appreciated by our fellow human beings depends on your particular wiring in terms of yasha. But anyone in artistry wants to please their client or customer. If they're not getting that from a client or customer, they feel very lost. That's not true in ideas at all. Not at all. It's absent.
Community only, where, for example, a community of scientists.
But some people may have more of a desire for that than others. That depends on an individual's, their own wiring and how much yasha is part of their food. That's on a very individual level. Some people may really care about that, and honestly, some people may not. That's not general. I have to go on. I absolutely have to go on. As it is, I'm going to go a little over time, and I'm not happy with that. Okay, going to the field of government. Okay, inclination. We're looking at inclination. People really concerned about fairness and rules. Now again, all kids say sometimes, that's not fair. But when it's something that it's their main thing that they're into, wanting to make people happy by taking care of them, maybe being heroic. A lot of times you'll see courage, bravery, which somebody was talking about, bravery. A lot of times these people have kind of a tough skin, like criticism sort of rolls off them. They're not so much affected by it. You will often see a take charge mentality. So I was once giving a class, and there were 2 adults, and there were some children in the room, 3, 4, 5 years old. They were kind of just playing. And there was one little girl, maybe 3, 4, and she was directing the other children. She was telling them where to go and what to do, my entire class. And at the end of the class, I said, whose child is this? And the parents come up like this. That's our child. I said, she's a natural leader. And they said, we're always telling her not to be so bossy, they said. And I said, what do you do? Each of them was a government leader. Both the mother and the father was a government leader. Another example I know of a devotee kid who the whole time he was growing up, his parents, his siblings would say, stop minding other people's business. Mind your own business. Mind your own business. Mind your own business. And he was always trying to enforce the family rules. Hey, mommy said you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. Daddy said that's not the rule. Mind your own business. Right? And he was always aware of what everybody was doing. And then he went on Indrajumna Swami's Polish tour. He was the second level in charge of security. And they said he was one of the best leaders that they had ever had. But as a kid, it kept getting him in trouble. So these people tend to be very goal-oriented, very decisive, very determined, and again, systems thinkers, but not the flows of the natural world, but the flows of human society. All right, let's look at the dharmic expertise. So they can intuitively understand and grasp emerging trends and needs throughout the area that they govern, whether that's their apartment complex or their city, or if they're a security guard. My grandson-in-law is in this field, and he has been in the military. He's an ex-Marine, but he also works as security guards in businesses. And he gave he was giving some classes to the devotees on what he calls situational awareness. And he was giving an example of how in a shop, how he would be able to tell what people were likely to be thieves. With like subtle clues he could pick up. So that's the dharmic expertise of this field. You're able to understand the flows of human society. You can kind of sense the system. You know how to move resources to increase people's happiness and prosperity. So the Gita lists the qualities of this field as heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership. And the Bhagavatam includes dynamic power, strength, determination, heroism, tolerance, generosity, great endeavor, steadiness, and high regard for those in the field of ideas. Now, I mentioned somebody had said firefighter, and I mentioned that the firefighter epitomizes the mentality of those with dharmic expertise in this field. So Arjuna had a son called Abhimanyu. Manyu means danger, Abhi means toward, running toward danger. The firefighters go into the house that's on fire, everyone else runs out. There's an abandoned warehouse with somebody shooting with a gun, they run in, everyone else runs out. They're energized by crisis. They tend to inspire others and command respect. Now, this is true even if they're a social worker or even if they're a police officer. We're not just talking about military commanders. Now, although they show their strength to protect others, the people with dharmic expertise in this field try to prevent problems. And again, my grandson-in-law, whose name is Sri Arjuna, he's a disciple of Gopal Krishna Maharaj. He was also talking about how the ideal person in this field tries to prevent fights with lions, not brag about how many times they fought with a lion. They tried to create an environment of safety for others and prevent crises. So although they're energized by crises and they're energized by danger, their general mood is to prevent danger and prevent crises. So they're collecting money, traditionally in rent or in taxes, or in the case of modern NGOs, they are collecting charity, and they redistribute it without profit-mindedness. They can redistribute everything, collect everything, redistribute everything. Often people in this field are very curious and very interested in knowledge and very studious, not always, but often. But their study is not theoretical. It's going to be very practical. They're probably going to be interested in history, politics, law, martial arts, morals, ethics, justice, and the like. Now, not only do they protect the humans in their domain, but they also protect all the living entities in their domain, which is a point Srila Prabhupada brings out a lot. Now, of course, those in the field of resources are particularly charged with protecting agricultural land and agricultural animals. And so those in the field of government are especially, they make sure those in resources do their job. And then they particularly protect the non-agricultural land and the non-agricultural animals. So my grandson who's traveling with me asked about one man who collects charity in order to create reserves for endangered wildlife. And he said, is that government? And I said, yes, that is the work of government. So the people in this field, they're willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of justice, being an honorable person, and the public interest. And again, they're literally often willing to sacrifice their life and their arm and their leg for the sake of justice and the public interest. You see that the dharmic expert in each of the fields has something that they're willing to sacrifice for. And again, this is the fundamental questions they ask: is it just and is it honorable? So it looks like I'm going to go about 7 to 10 minutes over. Is anybody really upset with this? Okay. Any questions specifically about the mentality of those in the field of government? By the way, I'm willing to share these PowerPoint. I mean, you're welcome to take pictures, but I'm also willing to just share the PowerPoints with everybody. Any questions specifically about the mentality of people in government? Yeah?
Very forthright, or they are diplomatic?
Diplomatic.
Diplomatic.
So government and resources people are diplomatic. There's a purport in the 18th chapter where Prabhupada talked about how in resources lying is compulsory. And he says that in government one has to use diplomacy. It's the fields of artistry and ideas where just honesty is a very important value. And again, remember, it's a different kind of honesty, though. The honesty of artistry is in telling you about the pipes for your plumbing, and in ideas, it's telling you a philosophical or medical or theological truth that you may go about. Yes. If you can't have diplomacy in government, diplomacy is required to prevent war. I mean, sometimes it fails. Sometimes diplomacy fails and you have to have war, but people in this field are expert at being diplomatic. And some specific careers in this field involve out and out lying, like being an undercover police officer, being, a spy. So there is a place in the world for people who are expert at lying. Correct. There's a place to live an honest dharmic living for people who are expert at lying. Isn't that interesting? You have to be a really good liar to be an undercover police officer. Do we need some? Oh, yes. To be a spy? We have in the Shastra accounts of spies, yes? It's not a new thing. When you're a government official and you get up and give a speech to the public, does anyone think you're telling the unvarnished truth? Come on. Seriously. Same with advertisements. If you see an advertisement, do you think, we talk about this in the book, the line between resources and ideas. If you're reading a magazine, you have to know what's an advertisement and what's journalism. Yeah. But that's the Dharma. Huh? Or what? Ethical. Each field has its own ethics. What's ethical? Yeah, what's ethical in one, Prabhupada will often say, like in the field of government, violence is ethical. In the field of ideas, it's unethical. Each field, if there's one thing you come away with from these seminars, each field has its own ethics. You make profit in government, that's unethical. You make profit in business, that's ethical. It's necessary. You have to, or there's no food next harvest. You please the customer with your plumbing, that's ethical. You please the customer with your research, that's unethical. You understand? Let me give you the research findings you would like to have. No. You're not getting that. This is not your field. That's not your field. By the way, if I have to be diplomatic, I contact my grandson-in-law. I say, hey, Sri Arjuna, this is a situation that requires diplomacy. What do I put in the email? And he'll tell me, and I'm like, that's perfect. All right. Just a few more things. So, in an ideal society, a person's value system and dharma and inclination is recognized when we're young. And you see from some of these questions and some of the examples I gave why people would be criticized as a child, especially if your parents were very different. Yeah? So I'll tell you a couple other stories, and we have them in the book. So there's this one very famous guy. So he tells how when he went to school, he was always doing this. And the teacher's like, stop that. Okay. Stop that, and he's being sent to the principal's office over and over again. So he's like 10 years old, and the teacher says, after school, oh boy, I'm in trouble again, right? He said, no, you're not in trouble. And what did he give the kid? Drums. Became actually a world-famous drummer. Another story, this is true stories, of a girl in school that she was always jumping out of her seat, and running around the classroom, and they could never get her to sit still. And so there was a meeting of the parents and the teachers and the school counselor, and the counselor said, maybe your child has ADHD, maybe she needs to be medicated. And one of the teachers said, let's try something. They put her in a room and turned on some music and said, let's just kind of watch. And she started dancing. He says, she's not sick, she's a dancer. And not only did she become a dancer, but she became one of the chief choreographers for a lot of Broadway musicals. So if you're very straightforward by nature and your kid is a diplomat, why can't you be truthful? But maybe maybe they're meant to be a diplomat. I'm really serious about this, Well, I can't count how many people have told me, Urmila, you have to be more diplomatic. And I'm like, I can't. It just doesn't work. And when I try to do it, it's so obviously phony. It's like, when someone has dyed hair and you can see the roots, and it's like... So what we need to do, we are in a society now where children are not of the same mentality of their parents, which was the case thousands of years ago, not always, but generally. You know, in my own family, there's people in a wide variety of fields. And to be able to see what are the values behind the behavior, which may come out in a way that is pleasing to us and may not. So this requires some expertise. We do have in the back of the book, an exercise to go through. Can someone lend me a book for a moment? So what I just went over today in this class is chapter 4. By the way, what we'll be doing tomorrow morning are chapters 5 and 6. I also went over in this class some things from chapter 7. So I went over things from chapter 4 and chapter 7. There is an exercise in the back of the book. In Appendix B. So if you're interested, that's very much a self-evaluation on Appendix B to look at your tendencies. And what I've just taught in the last 2 hours is basically chapters 4 and 7. Okay? If you still have a lot of questions, that's good. I'm happy. But I'm not going to answer any more now. Okay, so what's coming up is tomorrow. I hope that you can all stay tomorrow. I know it's a weekday, so I'm hoping that you can stay. I know Tuesday's a bank holiday, so maybe you've been able to manage this. Tomorrow morning's class, 10:30 to 12:30, covers the topic that my co-author Rukmini and I really felt was the wow of all this. Where when we got to that part, everything made sense. We're like, oh, that's why Krishna divides all the work into 4 and why these 4. Oh, and that'll answer your question. What happens when we're in the wrong field? What do we do to ourselves? And what do we do to society? And when you go through that, people come out of it and go, oh, now I know what's wrong with the world. Or now I know what's wrong with me and what I need to fix. So we won't cover everything that's in the book, but we will do that. And then again, our evening class tomorrow, we're going to overview the entire book. So that means that we will cover very quickly what we've covered in these 4 in-depth classes. Will not spend a lot of time on that. And we'll spend more time on an overview of the other parts of the book that we haven't covered in these 4 classes. So I hope that in addition to giving you more questions, that we have given you some answers. I hope it's not all questions. I hope things are becoming clearer and clearer and clearer, and that you're starting to see the pattern in how Krishna has designed the universe, and that you're starting to see why Srila Prabhupada wanted this so much. So again, anything good here is from Srila Prabhupada and the Lord and the Shastra. Anything bad here is from me. Please take the good and leave aside the bad. And by the grace of the Lord, we'll see you here tomorrow morning at 10:30. Thank you. Hare Krishna.